The essay we're going to look at for the sacred practice category is called Clair de Lune, and it's about the writer's practice of classical piano over the years and what they learned. Tall, slender, and splendidly poised, Anna's delicate frame reflected the softness of the melody and the calm of Debussy's Clair de Lune. At the time, she was only 5 years older than I was, a difference small enough that her finesse didn't seem impossibly out of reach. But at 13, my mind also widened the gap between us as I thought about how my fingers were neither slim nor so flexible, and my precision quite a few rungs below hers. Okay, so we have this really tender, depiction of a piano player, someone who is a figure that the writer is looking up to, who is sort of, embodying this perfection of classical piano. They're really exaggerating the gap between them and sort of looking at themselves, looking at their fingers and thinking, kind of doing a downward comparison and just being like, wow, they're a lot better than I am at piano. I sat paralyzed, a stupefied observer, while notes flowed into my body as if St. Peter had forgotten to close the gates. My usual nerve-wracking, teeth-chattering fear of performing flushed from my bones. I was supposed to play after her. I nearly forgot. An uncontrollable awe had overpowered my anxiety, which was meek by comparison to the salve of 2 consecutive minor thirds separated by 1 perfect octave. The dimly lit recital room erupted with life as Debussy's harmonies embodied tiny, invisible acupuncture needles that tickled my nerves into a flourish of goosebumps. A nearby mother quietly suppressed the cries of a baby. I was unaware that in the same place, 4 years later, conquering the same piece would bring to me a warming realization. My great pleasure in life is to pursue the inspiration that has stuck to me, while leaving an adhesive of jet stream as my own. Okay, wow. So that's a really inspired paragraph. I think that the writer actually used the word that comes to mind most for me when I read that, which is a sense of awe, an uncontrollable awe, right? This piece of music and the pursuit of, classical piano generally is like the greatest sense of meaning that this applicant has in their life. And you just transport it here, right, to this music hall where this person is performing this piece of music, even as the writer is, describing it. So amazing, vivid details. Like, we're really getting a sense that this is a special, sacred practice to this applicant who loves this piece of music and playing piano. Okay, let's keep going. Sometimes I wish that I lived in the future so I could see the past. My time machine would teleport me back to the otherwise mundane Sunday afternoon so I could see if I had stopped breathing. I think I may have. I want to know if I blinked. I want to know how my body handled the reality of something that I can nearly feel physically in retrospect. I watched Anna in reverence. The crescendos, the diminuendos, hammered into my brain so sweetly, triggered my innate yearning for a challenge. As the chubby, nerdy kid who always asked his dad for logic and math problems to solve at the dinner table, I never failed to accept a test of my ability. This adamancy, while occasionally bringing me to tears due to my tendency to blame myself, fueled the next 4 years of my 8-year classical piano journey. Anna's brilliance served as the 8-piece A-flat arpeggio that denoted my musical destination. Okay. So I like the nice mix of creative language and just core, almost thesis statement of the essay in these 2 paragraphs. In the first one, we have this nice idea. Sometimes I wished I lived in the future so I could see the past. Time machine would teleport me back to the otherwise mundane Sunday afternoon. So this idea of a time machine, it's just kind of fun. It's fun to read. And it shows the creativity of the writer and the skill of the writer in just bringing this moment to life and in showing just how meaningful this moment was to them. Then in the second paragraph, this is where I see more of that thesis opening up, right? I watch Anna in reverence. Then we move beyond the piano, and the writer is sort of reflecting on who they are. They're a nerdy kid who loves a logic problem at the dinner table. They always rise to a challenge whenever they feel like, there's an opportunity to test their ability. So this is someone who is, really serious about accepting challenges and pushing them forward. But also there's someone who struggles with self-doubt and with self-blame when things go wrong. So things aren't so, they ask a lot of themselves, I guess, but they're not so kind to themselves when things fall flat. So we get that nice background about who this person is beyond piano. Even though we're talking about piano, we're talking about Clair de Lune, that's important kind of personal context that helps make this a really personal essay. It's very vulnerable too, like identifying your weakness and laying it out like that, so just directly. It was 4 years later, and I was sitting on the same bench Anna had, staring down the same glossy keys. As I cautiously took my seat on stage, I was as apprehensive as ever. Even with the better part of a decade under the belt that held up the uncomfortably stiff slacks I had to wear as a facade of professionalism, I trembled quietly. As I inhaled and anxiously quivered, I took note of a young boy named Ryan timidly sitting in the front row, adorned with his snug top hat. I'd seen him in passing between our piano lessons. I'd seen him struggle through the same marked-up, monochromatic lesson book that had brought me both grins of sublime self-satisfaction and stinging tears of frustration. Okay, so this is sort of the moment of performance. Everything, we notice we don't get like a montage where they're like, for 4 years I practiced every day, like da-da-da-da-da. We just jump right to the moment where they're sitting on the stage in the same position that Anna was sitting in before, ready to play this piece. And they see someone in the audience who kind of reminds them of themselves. An overwhelming silence surrounded me as I began the sinuous alteration between flourishing and waning musical inflections. I reached the inevitable point where my shuddering hands took over from my brain. My nervousness, so aggravating and controlling, shorted my circuitry, rendering my consciousness useless. My body's physical memory of the piece was the only fingertip still grasping onto the precarious cliff of performance success. It slipped. My right hand glided over an octave. I hurried the gentle, fading ritardando. Okay, so after all this anticipation and buildup, this writer's, anxious sense has kind of overpowered them, and it's caused them to make a mistake in the performance. So definitely probably a blow, right, to this writer who's been building up this moment for 8 years, or 4 years, I guess, since they've seen Anna play it themselves. But as I ascended to my slowly unclenching feet and took a ceremonial bow, I glanced at Ryan, subdued and on tiptoes. With a magnifying glass, I could have seen the tiny needles poking out of his nerves and into his aspirations. I recognized the captivation in his eyes. I remembered the rapture. I could tell that my dedication had instilled in him the same sense of craving that Anna had sparked in me. Since that performance, I have cherished the ability to create and inspire, while constantly being appreciative of and humbled by a greater level of mastery than my own. My execution was flawed, but never have imperfections seemed so perfect. Okay, so that last paragraph does kind of everything, right? If up here we have this moment of anxiety, frustration, kind of overwhelming and, preventing, I guess, the writer from pulling off this performance flawlessly. The last paragraph sort of redeems that, right? As they look out into the audience and see that same level of rapture and just like totally, this student is completely hooked on the performance that the writer just gave. And it's a beautiful essay structure, I think, because it ends, as so many of the best college essays do, in the same place where it began, right? You have the writer who is young, watching this person, totally awestruck, probably a bit naive, not necessarily hearing the mistakes that were made of the piece, but just being so shocked to hear it at all. You have the practice that brings the writer, halfway around to the point where they're actually performing that piece. You have the mistake, that sort of moment where, in a way, in the piece, right, the writer is kind of confronting their own hangups about anxiety that threatens to sort of overwhelm their ability to think, to act well. and there's a glitch in the performance that, we might think, oh God, how is this applicant going to handle this? Or they're going to like hang their head? Are they going to be devastated that they weren't able to live up to the same degree of perfection that they remember? But then their performance is sort of completed as it comes full circle, and they notice the student in the audience who's looking at them just with the same degree of, naivete. I'm sure they didn't hear a single mistake, right? So this essay has a really wonderful kind of complete circle to it that, I get the sense that this is just a pure memory that this person has, right? When this person thinks about this experience, they see this as a moment of just incredible triumph, of profound meaning. This whole process leading up to this moment of inspiring someone else. And that, I think, is a really good kind of gold standard to hit for a sacred practice essay, right? It doesn't all need to be rosy and good. Like, it doesn't all need to just be like, oh, and then I had more fun going over here, and I had more fun going over here, and like, what an amazing time this extracurricular activity is. There can be bumps along the way, but what's really key is that the reader comes away with this overawing sense that this is very, very deeply meaningful, almost, spiritual to you. And I think that in this essay about piano, we get that. That's what makes it great.